Hello, I'm Peter Underwood and this is News from the Water. Unaccountable and they don't care. Lack of accountability has long been at the heart of Canal and River Trust's failure to convince boaters that it is honest, open and working to improve the vast heritage of our waterways. The politicians heading up the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs don't want CRT to fail because that might mean it comes back onto the government's books. So they seem to connive in letting it get away with cheating by providing fake figures, and it remains to be seen what the charity commissioners will make of CRT's actions. But for most people, of course, the only court of appeal against CRT's often draconian actions is the Waterways Ombudsman. But long-held suspicions that she's in CRT's pocket, they do pay her after all, seem to have been confirmed this week. CRT has already admitted falsification of its annual report after its fiddling of the figures was reported by a whistleblower and exposed by my colleague Allan Richards. He complained to the Waterways Ombudsman and after some frustrating delays and obfuscation ended up complaining about her to the chair of the Waterways Ombudsman's committee that CRT has set up. But suddenly, instead of a response from the committee chair, as he should have had, he's been contacted by the Waterways Ombudsman again, who now claims that not only his complaint about her, but his original complaint to CRT concerning the falsification of its annual report is apparently outside the jurisdiction of the complaint system and the Ombudsman scheme, so she can wash her hands on it. And apparently the chair of the Ombudsman committee, who can't speak for himself, she tells Allan that he agrees with her. Unsurprisingly, Allan has now written to the chair pointing out that the CRT Ombudsman scheme has already provoked concerns about its lack of independence from the Ombudsman's Association. He says in a letter to the chair, "I've made a complaint about the service I'm receiving, but the Ombudsman has taken it upon herself to respond rather than pass it to you for consideration." Now this type of action does little but reinforce independence concerns, says Allan, particularly with the active involvement of CRT's Tom Deards, who I understand is a member of the Waterways Ombudsman's Committee. We'll see what happens. Mooring restrictions campaign. CRT has long had a tendency to slash mooring times without proper consultation, and their latest efforts in Milton Keynes, the site of their anonymous headquarters building, has provoked a new campaign by the National Bargee Travellers Association. The Trust has imposed time limits of 48 hours on 300 metres of 14-day moorings and on 50 metres of 7-day moorings at 5 places in Milton Keynes: Wolverton, Gifford Park, Campbell Park, Woolston and Simpson. Now the MBTA says the restrictions represent yet another encroachment on the rights and needs of bargee travellers to moor for 14 days in one place. That's set out in the Act, of course. It claims CRT's strategy appears to be to incrementally reduce the 14-day mooring space so that bargee travellers' lives become untenable. And the association is asking its members to write to the two Milton Keynes MPs and also says, please tell CRT that you object to the 48-hour mooring restrictions, why you object, and that you will refuse to comply with them. Environment Agency under fire for unethical price hikes. The Environment Agency's consultation on some sharp price hikes in boat licences as it attempts to revise and standardise its charges across the Thames, Anglian and Medway waterway systems, is coming under attack from several directions. A petition is taking off which claims the Environment Agency is hell-bent on upping the price of river licences on the Great Ouse and connected rivers. It describes the plans as an unethical cash grab, making it the most expensive river system in the UK for what is a poorly maintained river, with strong stream advice rendering the rivers unusable for a lot of the time. And the petitions say these extra costs will not only affect boaters but marinas and other dependent businesses on the Great Ouse and connected rivers. And at the same time, the MBTA says that the increase in registration charges, 6% in 2022, 4% in 23, will make a total of more than 10% over 2 years. And the MBTA says this will disadvantage all liveaboard boaters on EA waterways, but especially those who are already struggling financially due to loss of work or illness during the COVID-19 pandemic. Some boaters will also be disadvantaged by the charges to the way in which registration charges are calculated. These proposed changes are a move to charging by boat area, not length on all EA waterways, and the removal of caps on charges for boats over a certain size and discounts for certain engines or types of boat. So it estimates, the MBTA that is, that the majority of boaters will see their fees increased by between £50 and £300, but some will see them rise by more than £600. The Environment Agency has recently restructured its navigation business departments with the aim of monetising its waterways, including of course making boaters pay more to navigate. It aims to raise an extra 2.1 million over 3 years. Spin and reality. Now, at a time when Canal and River Trust is spending lots of time and money on pursuing its well-being agenda, apparently at any cost, in just even to our credibility, in just the last few weeks we've seen them asking which spirit animal we might be, or getting us to watch lots of pretty pictures which encourage us apparently to breathe. And there's even some advice on how to build a musical folk instrument, as it's described, out of a couple of lolly sticks. So it's informative to look back at how the Trust deals with genuine environmental issues. Now let's put to one side the farce of conflicting and ever-changing advice on the disposal of the contents of composting toilets, and CRT's failure to provide any answers or assistance to boaters. Let's look instead at the use of boats to replace trucks, as they do across Europe and is highly desirable in view of global warming. Now, the air and colder navigation is almost the only CRT waterway to have a potentially substantial commercial use, but little has been achieved to re-establish commercial carrying despite lots of pious words. In fact, it took a long battle with Canal and River Trust for one of the country's oldest barge operators to be allowed to take freight to a wharf in Leeds. John Branford from Goole fought for months to get an agreement with Canal and River Trust to carry sand from Hull by way of the air and colder navigation to Nostrop in Leeds. It took no fewer than 2 interventions by local MP before Chief Executive Richard Parry finally gave the go-ahead. Mr Branford, who runs 3 ex-tanker dry cargo barges, said that Barbara Castle made the air and colder of freight navigation in 1968 when there were easily 20 wharves. But he pointed out that for the last 7 years there hasn't been a single place to offload on a 36-mile stretch between Goole and Leeds. CRT said the Trust had to negotiate for an existing tenant at Nostrop to reduce the space let under their lease to make room for Mr Branford and AC Aggregates to deliver there. Materials. The service eventually got underway in September last year and ended on December the 20th when part of the Aire and Calder Canal breached at Newbridge, sweeping away a 20-metre section of embankment after heavy rainfall. Now, ironically, CRT have blamed that particular event on global warming. Sean McGinley, director at Yorkshire and North East for CRT, said that repairs are becoming increasingly more expensive and complex in their design to help robustly withstand future flood events while working under the extra restrictions and challenges created by coronavirus. He apologised for the disruption that it was causing, but insisted they were doing everything possible. Well, it may be that navigation is open again around now, if everything goes according to plan. But Mr. Branford says it's frustrating, to say the least. He says that everyone says they want more freight off the roads and onto the canals and waterways, but they're not giving him or any other boat owner any help. Rubbish afloat. Now, it seems that somebody at CRT has been giving serious thought to rubbish. Now, not their social media efforts, but a scheme that's just been introduced on the Canal and River that could be usefully repeated elsewhere. A couple of workboats, Sulis and Vale of Pewsey, set off, one from Bath and one from Bradford upon Avon, to meet at Dundas, stopping along the way to collect rubbish from boats. Now, they were picking up larger items of rubbish, the sort of thing that boaters find difficult to get rid of: old fridges, sofas, stoves, the stuff they can't get to the local refuse sites, often because they don't have vehicles. And now, apparently every 3 months, CRT will be doing the same trip and bringing the rubbish to the tip for them. Lee Brain, CRT Area Operations Manager, said the floating tip boats were intended to help the boating communities keep the Canal and River looking its very best. Well, that's nice, isn't it? But it is sensible. Well, that's it for this week. See you again soon.
We need video and photos of all aspects of the waterways. Email files to peterunderwood2@gmail.com with your name and a brief description of it and where and when it was shot.